Hello again, everyone. We are now heading to the final sprint of GibTalks 2023. And one of the things that we want to introduce to GibTalks is the chance for charities to use the event as a platform to promote their causes, to tell us a little bit more about the charity, and hopefully to raise the profile of charity to do some very important work. Not least, of course, the charity that's represented next. As someone who works with young people, I feel that they provide a truly invaluable service, which includes a helpline service, an appropriate adult service, engaging with young people across our community. So please welcome on stage, from representing Childline, Annie Green.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Why Childline? Why me? I may have been born in Scotland, but I have spent almost half of my adult life here in Gibraltar. And I had what my parents referred to as a promising career in the civil service. However, what I really wanted to do was work in hotels. And my father kindly cautioned me. He said it would be very long hours, hard work, and not very well paid. And of course, he was absolutely right about that. However, I have no regrets, and I felt quite fortunate when I was able to start work at the Gibraltar Palace Hotel in 1979. And eventually, following a fairly long apprenticeship, I was appointed as the hotel's PR and marketing executive. There were so many challenges to overcome throughout the closed frontier era, and it was indeed hard work. However, it was also great fun. And I made lovely friends. We looked forward to the Wednesday Club and visits to the Queen's Cinema, a Scrabble Club, fashion shows, amateur fashion shows, all quite simple pleasures compared with the hectic world today. I have lovely, happy memories of Catalan Bay. I was almost an honorary Calatena. Some of my toughest times there at the hotel was spent dealing with exuberant members of the armed forces. Usually the worst for wear for a drink. However, they were not all bad. And 1988, I married Stuart, who was then the major in charge of the Army's Education Centre at Bleak House. Just short of a year later, Laura was born, and we had a traumatic few weeks as in her first few days of life, she contracted bacterial meningitis, and we were whisked off in one of the Royal Air Force's Royal Flight aircraft to the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford. Happily, she pulled through, and now we're delighted that she lives here in Gibraltar with her husband and 4-year-old daughter. After Gibraltar, we enjoyed various army postings to Germany, Verdun, Rheindahlen in Germany, and Salisbury, and back and forward, and North London. Before Stuart left the army, he took up a job as the Ministry of Defence's civil servant based at Royal Air Force Brampton in Cambridgeshire. We bought a thatched cottage for our retirement. Well, that was wishful thinking. It was in a lovely village just over the county border in Northamptonshire. And not long after we moved, I saw an advert in the post office for volunteers to work at a prison visitor centre. My response to that advert had a profound effect on my life. The Category C prison was situated in a rural, flat, bleak landscape. It was purpose-built building, only 100 metres away from the main entrance to the prison. Unlike most Category C prisons, it didn't cater for the local area. It was a specialist prison with 3 wings dedicated to the incarceration of convicted sex offenders. They came from across the whole of Britain. Now, in addition, there were life sentence prisoners, many of whom were elderly. There was a complete mix of social backgrounds, of ethnic and racial types, and of religions. And I know that at the time I started there, 6 clergymen were serving sentences. After I left, Rolf Harris, the entertainer, and the publicist Matt Clifford both served their sentences there. Following a criminal record bureau check, my application was accepted and I joined the volunteer team, which was sadly, at the time, too few in numbers to make any real impact. Any preconceived ideas I had about the prison service were quickly dispelled. I realised that prison officers do an extremely difficult job in very challenging and sometimes dangerous circumstances. Reoffending rates at that time were very high. The prison governor, a young fast-track graduate, he was very keen to try to reduce those rates because research had proved that if a prisoner could be kept in touch with his family, he was less likely to reoffend. They reckoned at that time about 30% less likely. So visitor centres were vital. I was immediately struck by the plight of the prisoners' families, especially the little children. They were innocent in all of this. Many had made long, arduous journeys to get to the prison, and even the process of obtaining a visiting order was complex and relied on the prisoner himself applying for the visit. So I quickly realised that what took place in a visitor centre could be so improved by just a few minor changes. There were visiting times 4 days of the week, and so the centre was open on those days, and it depended on unpaid volunteers to keep the show on the road. I made a list of suggested improvements and sent it to the governor. A few days later, he asked me to pop into his office for a chat. Now, you just can't pop into a prison. So I had to be accompanied to do this by a prison officer who, judging by his demeanour, and he'd already put me firmly in the he is another do-gooder category. The governor was interested in my suggestions and suggested improvements, and he hoped that they could be implemented soonest. Would I consider the paid post as a volunteer coordinator, and if I was free the following day, could I undertake the training to withdraw prison keys, which would allow me to enter the prison and make my way unescorted to the prison visits hall. It was deep inside the prison. I decided to accept the job offer, and the following day I received training and induction process, which enabled me to withdraw keys and to move throughout the prison without being impeded. With the prison officer's parting shot of stand up straight and try not to look nervous, I made my way to the empty visits hall. I wanted to familiarise myself with the play area, which looked incongruous in this bleak, colourless hall. All the chairs and tables were bolted firmly to the floor. My list of suggested improvements included giving briefings directly to newly arrived prisoners about what we did at the centre, what was available for their visitors, and how to apply for a visiting order, and to assure them that their visitors would have an opportunity to ask questions and be given help to complete the necessary paperwork. In order to do this, every Thursday morning would see me locked in a room full of convicted serious sex offenders, with my fingers crossed and with my best non-judgmental attitude on. I often thought, how did I end up in here? But it was the right thing to do. I was often inspired so much by the volunteers who did such great work at the centre, and their ability to be non-judgmental was vital and was so encouraging to witness the many genuine acts of kindness. We had a successful recruitment campaign which increased the size of the volunteer team, many of whom were good, kind and patient listeners. I became concerned about the negative impact that sharing some of these very distressing accounts of crime might have on them, so we compiled a list of organisations and helplines in the hope that more specialist help could be sought. One of those helplines was, of course, Childline. Many of the prisoners there were serving long sentences, and inevitably we got to know their visitors quite well. I often chatted to a lady whose husband, an ex-headmaster, was serving a 17-year sentence. She was always well-dressed, very articulate, and drove a very expensive car. She often expressed her concern over the effect that her husband's imprisonment was having on her 14-year-old daughter. I suggested that she should call Childline. 3 months later, she popped into my office to tell me that she would no longer be visiting her husband and she was no longer so concerned about her daughter as she had called Childline for support, and the support that they were giving her would be ongoing. Applying for charitable grants became a regular task, and we were all delighted when a substantial amount was awarded by the John Paul Getty Jr. Trust Fund. Part of it was to pay for me to have a specialist counselling course. I felt very guilty, and shortly after finishing the course, Stuart came home and told me that the MOD had offered him a job in Gibraltar, and whilst we were happy and pleased to be returning to the Rock, we would have to leave in just a few weeks. Later that day, I was chatting to a Buddhist priest who was a regular visitor to the prison. I had told him how guilty I felt about not making use of what I had learned on the counselling course and using the funds in that way. He said, "Don't you worry, you will find a way, and a way will find you." A few weeks later, happily back in Gibraltar, I bought the Chronicle, and there was the advert appealing for volunteers to be Childline listeners. Childline Gibraltar was established in 2006, and we have much to thank the founders for. The Mester Ranson, who established Childline in the UK, attended the launch at the Mount and also paid us a visit in 2016. Sadly, we hear now that she is suffering from lung cancer, and we wish her well. Our helpline is operational every day of the year between 5 and 9. Last year, 759 calls were answered on the helpline, WhatsApp and live chat. That is an average of over 15 calls per week. The three most frequent reasons for call-outs were sexual education, mental health, family relationships. As a result of these conversations last year, we made 25 referrals to the care agency. Because we had concerns with the young person's welfare, we refer someone if we feel they are at risk of harm or neglect. Childline listeners are trained using the same model as Childline UK. The training is constantly being updated, and we strive to keep pace with the ever-changing world that children are in. The young people face, and they face so many difficulties in this ever-changing digital high-tech world. When a young person is detained by the Royal Gibraltar Police, their parent or guardian is either unwilling or unable to attend. Our Childline appropriate adults will always be there to safeguard the young person's interests, rights and welfare. Last year, the RGP called us out 29 times, and we provide this service 24 hours a day, every day, 52 weeks of the year. Indeed, one of our trained volunteers is on standby as I speak. Childline community programs and community events such as our wellbeing champions, positive parenting courses, schools programs focus on prevention and early intervention. Their themes have been developed in direct response to locally identified areas of need, especially those highlighted via our helpline service. Together with my fellow trustees, our 7 part-time staff, 90 brilliant volunteers, we will continue to strive and to be there for children and young people in Gibraltar. It is such a privilege to be involved and to enjoy the altruistic camaraderie, and it has been a great privilege to have this opportunity today to tell you about it. Thank you very much.